the emperor or empress, they came here by boat. So it's this place, they get on the bank, so they build an archway to welcome them. Yeah.
Rocky is a spectacular tour guide.
In ancient China, we use 时辰 period.
He's also the probably very surprised man I wrapped my arms around the moment we met in Beijing's airport. That's because months earlier, he was the one on the ground in China who made sure we did not lose our son when a Chinese-imposed deadline almost sent our 2-year-old back into the system.
Number 9 is a very, very special number in China.
So let me tell you, I love Rocky. During our first 3 days in China, he made sure we learned as much as possible about his country, the culture, and the language, in hopes we can someday share it with our soon-to-be adopted son.
Be flexible when you travel. This is not a vacation. This is, in a sense, kind of an adventure.
Tiffany Williams, our case manager with the adoption agency All God's Children International, helped us navigate the piles of paperwork and deadline for the nearly 2-year process. But none of that comes close to what our 2-year-old endured to get to Gotcha Day.
They have to go through a 60-day abandonment process, so they're put in the local newspaper. So this is probably what happened with James. And if nobody stepped forward for 60 days, then he is considered abandoned.
Our next flight brought us to Fuzhou, the capital of the Fujian province, the home province of our little guy.
It's hard to do eyeliner when your hand won't stop shaking.
Who we were about to meet for the first time.
T-minus 10 minutes.
Gotcha Day was here.
It's like the long walk down the hall.
After flying halfway around the world, a walk to the hotel's conference room
Here.
brought us to James.
Do the toys. Let's give him a toy. Hi.
We just see all different types of ways that children react to Gotcha Day. It's traumatic. You look different, you smell different, you're speaking a different language, and ultimately you're a stranger to them.
他用哪个用的比较好？
In what seemed to be an incredibly scary room, there was James, known as Wei Wei at the time, smiling.
Not very well, but you can.
Soon it would be time to go. And as uncertain as he was, James would go with us.
This bag is his personal things.
The orphanage staff gave him a gift of jade, said their goodbyes, and we headed back to our hotel room with our scared and confused 2-year-old son.
Just chilling.
This is not a time to get out and be tourists. If you want to do that, you go to Beijing early, because a lot of times your children are grieving and having a hard time with the adjustment.
Wait. Yeah.
With a 5-day wait on his passport, we took a day to drive to Xiamen to see the orphanage where James first stayed before heading to foster care, and the spot he had been abandoned when he was a month old. My husband took a lot of pictures and video of just about every square inch of that busy, fast-paced neighborhood. Knowing James will one day ask about his past, I tried to explain all of this.
Buddy, this is your neighborhood. It actually gets me kind of choked up. This was his finding place, as they call it. I got a little, it's just hard to think that somebody could abandon their child. So this is Wei Wei's neighborhood. Wei Wei, this is where, and I saw school kids everywhere. Wei Wei, but now your neighborhood's gonna be in Virginia. Love you, buddy.
All adoptions in China are abandonment cases. James won't know his biological parents, making this trip to his finding place that much more meaningful.
If they say, tell me about what you know about me, tell me about my history, you can say, I've been there, I've stood there, I've taken this picture, I have, felt the air on my face, I have had the feet, my feet on the ground there. I think that's powerful.
Then, with his passport in hand, we flew to Guangzhou.
Every family, doesn't matter what province, goes out of Guangzhou, where the consulate is at for the United States.
Our week in Guangzhou included taking an oath of citizenship for James, a series of medical exams, Good job. And finally, we got his visa. We could go home. Adjusting to our new family would have its stresses. But we knew this incredibly courageous little boy would grow to know our son Henry as a spectacular big brother. And James would soon know us as mom and dad. Abandoned at 1 month on a busy Xiamen City street in the Fujian province of China, our now 2-year-old son had a cleft lip and a cleft palate.
So typically in the States, if a kid is born with a cleft lip and palate, we'll do the cleft lip at around 3 or 4 months of age. And then when they're about 8 or 9 months of age, we do the cleft palate.
Eventually, while in foster care, surgeons in Longyan, China, repaired his lip. And now, finally home with us, his family, we could take care of his cleft palate.
I'm just going to open your mouth up just a bit.
Like many families from around Southwest Virginia, we look to the Carillion Cleft Lip and Palate Clinic for help. Dr. Mark Schoeman heads up the clinic after he spent a year in India with Operation Smile, where he did hundreds of surgeries for children with cleft lip and palate.
In America, that's the standard of care for kids with clefts, is a comprehensive cleft clinic, because people realize that kids with clefts need many different services, many providers.
Once a month, all the specialists convene in one place to check the patient, determine the care, and how they plan to move forward.
And I think the good thing about the comprehensive cleft clinic is at the end of the day, we discuss every patient, and so every provider is on the same page as what the plan is.
With an unrepaired cleft palate, which is basically a hole where the roof of his mouth should be, surgery was inevitable. We were told, though, to wait several months to work on bonding and attachment with our new little guy. Still, the morning of surgery arrived before we knew it.
Oh, you're trying to go? Good job.
As we waited, Stephanie Valit, a child life specialist with Carillion, focused on keeping James calm.
They meet a lot of people. We all wear silly outfits. When we get in the operating room, we have to wear masks, so that can be scary.
For a 2-year-old, familiarizing him with the hospital meant bubbles, stickers, and playing with the mask that would soon be used to administer the anesthesia.
There were some moments where I thought he was a little bit stressed out. There was a lot going on, definitely some overstimulation. His choice was to take out all the toys, and then I think later on that became a little stressful for him.
After talking with a multitude of doctors who had a part in all of this, it was time for surgery.
All the tissue's there, it's on the sides, and so what I'm going to do is raise up that tissue and bring it to the middle and suture it together in several layers. And then also the muscles that we use for speech in the back of the mouth are in abnormal positions, so I'll be taking those off the back of the bone and putting them back in the middle where they belong.
While Dr. Schoeman took care of that, my husband and I waited and waited. Once in recovery, we had a night in the pediatric ICU ahead of us before moving to the regular pediatric floor, and then home. There's still plenty ahead. More surgeries, plenty of dental work, and speech therapy.
I think some of the harder parts are them integrating into the school and having sort of a facial difference. But they understand what it is to be different, and I think they're just some of the greatest patients I've ever had.
We realize it won't be instantaneous, but someday James will be able to communicate like any other little boy. And thanks to this spectacular team, someday we will get to hear him say, I love you. Hi, how are you? The welcome home, hugs.
I missed you.
I missed you too. Smiles, exhaustion. After 2 weeks living in a hotel room with a 2-year-old we just met and flying from the other side of the world, we were finally home. And the reality of taking a child from everything he knows set in.
It's hard. You're exhausted because you're also traveling internationally, so the jet lag just gets you.
We happily took help from family and friends, some of whom adopted themselves.
I'm putting these in.
Peg McGuire and her husband, Joe Campagna, adopted 2 boys, Timothy from Guatemala and Charlie from Ethiopia.
He does have his times to set back, I think.
They understand the raw feelings that come during those first few months home. A time you are told to cocoon, spend time within your family unit to allow James to understand we were the ones who would care for him. It didn't take long to realize I don't cocoon well.
I was sensing it because I'd been there, sister.
Food did and still does cause James stress. Early on, we dealt with jet lag and a 2-year-old who was just too stressed to sleep.
Reach out for help, talk to your social workers, cry. M&Ms, I think, were very helpful.
We met up with Chad Wills, a counselor at Associates in Brief Therapy, starting our appointments before we even left for China.
You had done your research, you had talked with several other professionals.
It gave us time to process the importance that we stay calm on Gotcha Day, the day we finally got our sign, and the day James had to say goodbye to everyone and everything he had ever known.
He would fall into a style of probably an anxious attachment style, so meaning he had a lot of clingy responses to you, and I don't have to tell you about that. The sleepless nights, if you leave the room, it's like out of sight, you have left me, very fearful response, what if I'm left again?
After years of work to get to this point, there were moments I wondered if my family would make it. Early on, smiles didn't come as easy for James. To now, he finally realizes that big brother of his, Henry, is pretty cool.
Henry's been a trooper,
Consistency and routine continue to be imperative. I'll be back. My constant reassurance, I'll be back, began when James would absolutely wail when I simply got out of the car to go get him from his car seat.
Right there, bud.
It evolved into bigger transitions, such as leaving him at daycare and reassuring him I would return.
Hey, how's it going?
Now, walks right in.
I'll see you later, bud.
Of course, we realize there's still work ahead.
He does still have a long way to go. It's still pretty new for him.
April Hara is our local social worker. She and Tiffany Williams, our case manager from our adoption agency, continue to be a huge help with James's adjustment and how to handle his grieving.
Maybe it's going to be in their sleep through night terrors or nightmares later, or maybe they are going to cry quietly in their crib later at night.
James was in a foster home for most of his life. To him, his foster mom was his mom.
And you give him permission to love her, and still love us, and you honor her, in the way that you talk about her and that kind of thing. I do think it can be a positive thing.
They don't know who to come to for comforting, so they don't know that I'm mom and that I'm here forever and I'm going to love you no matter what all the time.
Mama.
Night-night, buddy.
The first-year home will be filled with mile markers.
You have to experience sort of every different layer together. This is our first time going to the pumpkin patch. This is our first Christmas.
For now, we will focus on daily accomplishments.
We're all good.
Bedtime is calmer. I no longer have to hold James's flailing arms and legs.
There we go.
As he screamed for his foster mom each night.
Night-night, buddy.
Now we can sing Twinkle Twinkle with our son, not over his crying to try and calm him down.
How I wonder what you are.
Once afraid of my husband, James now happily plays with Dad and goes to him for comfort. And of course, James and Henry have their typical annoyances with one another, but those epic meltdowns from early on have calmed. James has been through a lot, but he's like any other 2-year-old.
It's one of those areas where I don't want to make light of all the transitions he's been through, nor do I want them to become his entire story.
It's time to look ahead, guide him, love him, and watch him grow into the person he's supposed to be.
Again, it's worth it. But, I'd rather have this family than any other family that God could have given me.
We were told in China, these kids were survivors. You know what? So is our family.
Suddenly now they feel like they've always been here,